To take this opportunity to talk about something positive that's happening back home in Ohio with the help of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps is involved with some civic-minded community volunteers in something that will help us to preserve our history in Ohio. It wouldn't be happening but for the vision of the head of the Army Corps, Mr. R.D. James, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. It's a good news project regarding the preservation of an important piece of history of the Northwest Territories and my home state of Ohio. It's called the Barker House, and it's an historic home that dates back almost 200 years when it was built by the owner's father, who was a Revolutionary War officer and a famous early settler and pioneer architect in Ohio. It's a number of historic homes of his were built along the Ohio River, and this is one of them that's still left standing. Colonel Joseph Barker Sr. was his name, and again, he's one of our most famous early pioneers in Ohio. The house was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1979 for its historic significance. Joseph Barker Sr. and the houses he built actually played an important role in a new award-winning book that I would recommend to you by that great historian, David McCullough. It's called The Pioneers, and it tells the story of the Northwest Territories and the founding of Ohio in the wake of the Revolutionary War. In the Pioneers book, Colonel Barker's stately homes were an anomaly out on the frontier. His own home was described in the book as, and I quote, "a large brick house in the Federal style with a handsome front door flanked by recessed side windows and an elliptical fan light overhead. Once completed, the whole house was painted white and soon became, as intended, a distinguished seat of hospitality." End quote. This also describes the historic Barker House we're trying to preserve. These houses brought a level of architectural refinement that stood in sharp contrast to the log cabins on the rugged landscape where these pioneers were settling. The Barker House is currently owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's owned by them because it's right next to the Willow Island Lock and Dam on the Ohio River. In fact, the house was once used as office space by the Corps back in the 1960s. But today, the house is still standing. It's vacant, it's in bad shape, and it's unsafe to enter, but it's savable. I visited this historic Barker House back in September of 2018. I learned then that the Corps was proposing to demolish the Barker House. They then considered a proposal to try to move it brick by brick to a new location off of Army Corps land. Neither made sense. That's when I met Jack Hazley, who has led a group along with Wesley Clark, Bill Reynolds, Bob Ferguson, and others, a local Barker House Friends group, who said they'd be willing to raise the money to restore this home on its historic site overlooking the Ohio River. They wanted to be sure that it would be accessible to visitors there and can be made into a museum. I immediately called the Secretary, Mr. R.D. James, of the Army Corps, and asked if he would reconsider the decision to demolish this historic home. After hearing the story of the house and the details of the local group's plan to preserve it, and after getting a thorough assessment from the Army Corps, Mr. James agreed to reverse the Corps decision and to work with us on preserving the home. He deserves great credit for that. Congressman Bill Johnson, who represents the area, has also been an excellent partner in pursuing these sensible solutions. Right now, we are working on developing legislation that I hope to introduce soon to convey the house and the surrounding land to the Friends Group. We've made a lot of progress so far. Just last week, the Corps completed drawings of the specific parcel proposed to be conveyed, which also includes the creation of an access road so that the house can be visited and enjoyed by the public. And we appreciate the Ohio Department of Transportation and Director Jack Marchbanks for working with us on that. The road access issue was critical, and ODOT was very helpful. Also, the Ohio State Historic Preservation Office has jumped in and played a constructive role. This is an example of a true public-private partnership, again, made possible by Secretary James. So again, I'd like to thank him, thank the Army Corps, thank his team. I'd like to thank the Barker House Friends Group, the Ohio Historic Preservation Office, ODOT, all of whom are partnering together with us to ensure that this historic structure is still standing, so it can tell the story of our rich history for generations to come.